excited to be here, and I am so excited to have this wonderful conversation that I'm going to have with a guest today. And I hope that this helps you, motivates you. I hope you learn something about the spiritual world that you did not know about and inspires you to continue on your spiritual journey. So, welcome, welcome, welcome to Michelle's Inspiration Hour. So before we get started, I'm going to say a quote that I found in our guest book, and it says, "Don't give up before the miracle happens," and that's by Anon. And I just love that quote because a lot of people think, you know what, I'm on the right spiritual journey, and then things get difficult, and you stop. And then things stop happening until you get right back on that pathway. So let's go ahead and talk about our next guest. So, former emotional hot mess and world class awfulizer, Jennifer Moore supports other highly sensitive, intuitive women to release empathic overwhelm and distress so that they can access their inner wisdom and power. Jen brings over 30 years of experience to her work where she merges practically intuition and skill to offer insight, guidance, and emotional freedom to those she serves. Jen holds a master's degree in psychology and religion, is an accredited master trainer for EFT International, founder of Empathic. I don't know why I'm having a hard time saying this. Empathic, there we go, Empathic Mastery Academy, author of Amazon bestseller Empathic Mastery, host of the Empathic Mastery Show, and is the creator of the two Oracle decks and the photographic, oh my gosh, photographic healing tarot. I may need to redo that. So let's go ahead and bring on our guest. All right. Hi, Jennifer. Don't you love how you get tongue tied when you're trying to introduce somebody and it's just not working?
Oh my god. I mean, as another podcaster, I feel you so much because I have had so many times where I start reading a bio and I just flub the line and I have to rewind and start all over again. So, yeah, I don't know, it's something about bios. They're designed to be read wrong,
Oh, absolutely. Well, you know
Yeah,
what, too? It makes us human. People
exactly,
go, you know what?
exactly.
You can't be perfect. There's we're going to mess things up, but it's okay to be messy. And I love in
Yeah,
your bio that you said emotional hot mess.
exactly. Yeah.
So tell us, I am so excited to learn about where you have been, what you have done, because you have done so much.
I have. I have, and I'm like, "Oh my goodness," and we're gonna just, like, scratch the surface. I'm sure, Michelle, you and I could be talking for hours and hours and hours, but, yeah, I mean, I was a highly sensitive, very emotional child, and the thing was, I was always reacting instead of responding. I was constantly, like, flinching to the world around me, and so from a very, very early age, I was being told that I was too sensitive, that I was overreacting, that I was taking things too personally, that I was worrying about things too much, and that I just needed to kind of suck it up and get over it. But the problem with that is that, um, you can't necessarily just suck it up and get over it when part of the issue is that you're picking up a lot of the things that are going on in the world
Mhm.
around you that other people aren't necessarily owning.
Oh, absolutely.
So, I could go on and on about examples of how being a hot mess affected me, but I guess what I would say is that one of the things that it really did was it really hobbled my confidence and it hobbled
Mhm.
my sense of risk taking and the ability to trust that I could do things. And so, on one hand, I was an artist and I was a creative person, and I was, I felt very, very strong in my convictions about certain things. But on another level, like, I didn't believe that I could work a 9 to 5 job. I didn't believe that I would get anxious about making a phone call. Didn't necessarily think that I would be capable of just trying certain things out. And I look back at my life now and I think, wow, if I had had more self esteem and more self confidence,
Mhm.
how different would my life have been?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and did you have a lot of people say, "Oh, honey, not only are you creative, you're oversensitive, but you may be a little depressed." I mean, did you have a lot of people tell you that? And then when did you realize also that you go, "You know what? There's more to it than what everybody keeps telling me."
So, I mean, in terms of there's more to it than anybody keeps telling me, there are so many pieces to that question because there's the awareness of there's more to it in terms of being an empath that has to do with like I'm picking up on the thoughts, feelings, and energy from the world around me. But then there's more to it in the sense of like the spiritual realm and the magical realm and knowing that there's things. And in many ways, both of these awarenesses really kind of came to this amazing like moment of clarity, kind of like dawns on marble head when I was 9 years old, because I had my first like undeniable prophetic dream. And what happened was I was 9 years old and I had this vivid dream that my mom died. And the next day, I had the worst day of my entire life. I was definitely a depressed 9-year-old at that point in time. And so at the end of that day though, at dinner time, my mom announced that the mother of one of my very first best friends had died the night before of breast cancer. And I knew that there was a correlation. I just knew that there was a correlation. And so for me, and I will say that this was a child who had moved out of state, and we're talking the 1960s when nobody was using phone calls to talk. Like parents would not be letting like 6-year-olds talk on the phone with each other. Like the long distance bill would have been, just like absolutely prohibitive. And so I had not been in touch with her at all for a number of years because they had moved when we were both about 6, but I was still connected to her. And so that experience showed me that I was connected to things that were bigger than myself, showed me that there was more to the universe than is dreamt of in our philosophy, but also showed me how I was sensitive to picking up the emotions and the experiences of other people. It's only been very recently that as I've been recording a number of podcasts, that I had another understanding about this, which is that, and I'll just share, because of, having written Empathic Mastery, my whole specialty is working with highly sensitive empaths. Let's just start with just sort of a fundamental definition of my definition of what it means to be an empath. And so an empath is a person who picks up the thoughts, the feelings, the energy, could be an animal for that matter,
Mhm.
but is a being who picks up the thoughts, the feelings, the energy, and the sensations from the world around them. Except that, unlike somebody who's an intuitive or a psychic or a medium, where they know they're picking up information from the outside world and they know it's coming from the outside world, empaths pick this information up, but we process it like it's our own. So if I'm picking up sadness that is going on in the world outside of me, I'm going to, where a psychic might be or an intuitive might walk into a room where there's been an argument or a fight or somebody's been having a really hard time. They would walk in and they'd be like, wow, this space feels really sad. This
Mhm.
space feels really angry. This feels like something's just really intense has just gone on in here. The empath walks into the room and goes, why do I feel so sad? Why do I feel so angry? Why do I feel so weird? And so what I realized with this 9-year-old experience was that I did not process it. Like I didn't have a vision or a picture of my friend standing at her mother's deathbed. I experienced it as if it was my own.
Mm.
And so that for me was like a very, very important indication that there was something going on with me, that like I was not just like the average bear, you know?
Right.
And so that's kind of gives you the whole thing. And then you asked the other question of like, was I told I was depressed? I don't think I necessarily started being told I was depressed or receiving that kind of quote diagnosis
Mhm.
until I was in my later teens. My moods and particularly my depression correlated directly with my hormones.
Mm.
And in hindsight, I'm really sad that nobody was doing much work around PMS at that point in time,
Right.
because even just tracking my period would have made a huge difference, because
Right.
it never failed. I would get black moods 3 days before I was gonna get my period, be like, "Why do I feel so horrible?" And then all of a sudden it was like, "Oh." Like, life got a lot better when when I just started to keep a menstrual calendar,
Yeah.
just
Right.
so that I was like, "Okay, that's why you're gonna feel this way." But yes, I was definitely, once I got into my late teens and early 20s, I was not only being told I was too sensitive and overreacting, I was also being told that I was, that I was depressed,
Right.
and that I
Right.
needed medication, and that I needed, and unfortunately, nobody was talking about the fact that my, like, couple pounds of M&Ms a week habit was substantially contributing to my depression as well.
Right. And it's so interesting because in your book, you do talk about that,
Yes,
a lot of the, stuff that we tend to eat makes it even worse.
it makes
And
it even worse.
so can you kind of talk about that since you brought it up about the M&Ms? How does
Yes.
that affect you?
So basically, at this point in time, there's a lot more people talking about like the gut brain connection, and how, our gut directly affects our mood and directly affects our brain. Some people, like, I've even heard it explained that like the cellular material that is in our brain is comparable or similar to the cellular material in our intestines. And so the thing is that sugar, as you know, feeds, or most people know, feeds bacteria. It feeds, like, if you eat too much sugar in your mouth, you're going to get cavities. If you eat too much sugar in general, you're kind of going to get cavities in the rest of your body too. And what happens is, once our body gets too much sugar, there's a couple things that happen. Insulin is a hormone. And so when we eat too much sugar, we dysregulate our hormonal balance. And one hormone almost inevitably affects all of the other hormones. So it becomes a cascading effect. So when our body is trying to compensate for too much sugar, we're going to set our body's equilibrium off, and we're going to kind of go into this hormonal imbalance. But the other thing that happens with sugar is that it really compromises the integrity of our gut, and it causes us to develop basically what's called gut dysbiosis, where we develop bacterial overgrowth in our gut, which then starts to really affect our brain. It causes brain fog, it causes moodiness, it can cause anxiety. It also has a tendency, sort of, if you think of, there's a metaphysical term, as above, so below, as within, so without. If you think about, as you're eating foods that are causing gut dysbiosis, it compromises the integrity of the gut lining. And that will eventually cause what is called leaky gut. And leaky gut is where your body starts to become less sturdy, less like, it's sort of like your filters and shields start to get compromised. And what's fascinating is that as sort of the internal filters and shields of your gut start to get compromised, so do the external, sort of metaphysical filters and shields that are in, sort of outside of you. So we become more and more porous. We become more and more emotionally labile, and we start to really feel more intensely. And the challenge with this overgrowth is also that as we get this gut dysbiosis, and what happens is, candida, which is a form of yeast starts to take over and starts to crowd out all the good bacteria in our body, and it starts to do damage. It starts to cause
Mhm.
inflammation. It starts to cause brain fog. It can, it just really impacts us. But it also is a vicious cycle because it wants to survive. And what it also causes is cravings. So you start eating a little bit of sugar,
Mhm.
it grows the bacteria in your body. That causes the cravings to grow stronger, which causes you to eat more sugar, which then causes the body to become more out of balance and dysregulated. And so it's for an empath, there's not just the physiological experience of it, but there's the fact that we are already more vulnerable and more porous to taking on the thoughts, feelings, and energy from the world around us. And when we are consuming foods that basically dysregulate our body,
Mhm.
what ends up happening is then we become even more vulnerable, susceptible, and porous to feeling and taking on all the stuff. So that's about as short and
Uh,
sweet as I can possibly give you
that
for explaining this really big concept.
it's almost like a vicious cycle because, being an empath, you're going to crave that because when we're, sad or when you are overwhelmed, where do we go? We don't go for a banana.
No, we
We
go for a banana.
no, we go for the M&Ms, but, okay, so let's go ahead and talk about your wonderful book, okay? Because, yes, I absolutely love that. It matches an empathic mastery, and to
Yes.
me, I love how you talked about it earlier where, there's a difference between being an empath and being a psychic,
Yes.
medium because you can feel the different energies. Because when you're an empath, it's so confusing of what's going
So
on.
confusing.
And in your book, it's such a good resource. I wish I had had it to read when I was younger.
Me too. I totally wish I had it when I was younger. And I actually wrote it. I actually wrote it for my younger self and kind of wrote it for my future incarnation self too, where it's like I hope I find this book
Right.
a lot earlier in my life, but I wrote it for all of us who were struggling, just like not with no clue, who often were being told that we were over too sensitive, overreacting, taking things too personally,
Right.
and just like suck it up buttercup. Like
Yeah.
if I hear that one more time, I swear I'll punch somebody. But the empathic mastery is a 5-step system to go from emotional hot mess to thriving success. And basically part 1 of the book is the what and the why. And it's all about, how did we get this way? What does it mean to be an empath? What is the difference between being an empath and an intuitive or a psychic? And I will say that most empaths are also very psychic and very intuitive. The problem is that when the empathic overwhelm is sort of dominating the channel, then you can't distinguish what's yours and what's not yours. And as a result, all that gift, all of that psychic ability, that intuitive ability, it just kind of doesn't really do you a whole lot of good because it's because of that emotional confusion. So part 1 is all about what does it mean to be an empath? Why are we this way? I talk a bit about some of the interesting things like inherited family trauma, the inherited the fact that we're now starting to find that fear is passed along like epigenetically, that we pass it down in the DNA, as well as the idea of mirror neurons, which are a part of our brain that responds to things going on outside of us and basically mirrors that experience. And one of the theories is that empaths have more mirror neurons than the average person does, that we're more sensitive to these things. So the first part is all about what does it mean to be an empath? Why are we this way? And what is the impact of this? The second part is the how. The second part is the 5-step system. And what I discovered over the years is that, I don't know if, probably you and I are fairly around the same generation. And, when we were younger, the advice that I think most of us were being given on a spiritual path was like twofold. One was open yourself up to receiving more information. So any of the psychic or spiritual development classes were mostly about how do I get more information, not how do I process the information that I'm already getting overwhelmed by. But then the other part of it is that so often we were just told, just send love and light to it, put a bubble of light up around it, and everything will be fine. The problem with trying to put up protection in a bubble of light before you address the stuff you've already absorbed is that it's kind of like, having gasoline in a pressure cooker. It's like you can close the pressure cooker, but if there's gasoline in it, it's going to cause you problems. Or one of my favorite descriptions is like if you were in a shower or in a bathtub and you had the bathtub drained and, you took a bath, you washed all of the dirty stuff off of you, but then you didn't drain the bathtub and then you just pull a shower curtain around, it's not gonna work. And so what I discovered was that we absolutely need to do two things before we can really protect ourselves from taking on more energy. And that is, first, we need to recognize that we are feeling out of sorts. And over the years, recognize has gone from sort of the what's mine, what's not mine to, first we recognize we're an empath, then we recognize when we're out of sorts and
Mhm.
we're feeling off of our baseline. Then we start to ask ourselves the question, is this mine? What's mine? And then we ask the question, what's mine, what's not mine? And finally, where is this coming from? What is this about? So the first step is very much about discernment. It's about identifying and discerning. The second step is release, because if we are carrying, we've absorbed stuff, we need to release it, we need to let it go. So this is about letting go of the stuff that is not ours, but also
Mhm.
letting go of the stuff that is no longer serving us. And as you mentioned, I'm an EFT practitioner and a master trainer for EFT International.
Mhm.
And so release, I have found personally that tapping EFT is one of the most effective tools I have ever encountered. And as you did your homework and you're amazing, I have to say, that amazing trailer, I've never felt more beheld and seen. It actually brought
Oh,
tears to
good.
my eyes. Thank you so
Oh, you're
much.
welcome.
Oh, I was so
Thank you.
moved. And so as you could see from that trailer, I have a lot of training in a
Mhm.
number of different modalities, flower essences, Reiki, breath work. I'm also shamanic practitioner, as well as years of talk therapy and um, a master's degree in psychology and religion with an orientation towards pastoral care. And what I found is that nothing has been more effective in terms of shifting energy and shifting pretty much anything that is going on than tapping EFT has been for me. So, release is all about letting go of the stuff that's not serving us. And then the third step is protect. And that is both about energetic boundaries, where we can establish and build up our filters and shields so that we are not carrying around all of the intensity from the world around us, or picking up the intensity from the world around us. But it's also about strategic boundaries. It's about things like your crazy family member sends you a drunk text at like midnight, you don't answer it. That if you don't have the resources, that if you don't have the mental and emotional energy, or even if you just don't want to do something, that you don't have to, that you don't do it, that you set a boundary. No, I cannot give you $300 because of your poor planning. No, I am not going to drop everything in my life to go fix your emergency. And for me, protection is as much about having that robust set of sort of replenished filters and shields. In some cases, for empaths, it's having a sturdy kind of aura for the first time in their life. Um, but it's also about really knowing, like, not my monkey, not my circus. And also, one of my absolute favorite lines in the world is, your poor planning does not constitute my emergency. And really giving ourselves permission to say, no, not my monkey, not my circus, not my problem. you do you, boo. Like, so sorry you're going through that, but not my responsibility to fix this for you. And so that is protect. And then the fourth step is connect, because, you've heard the saying, the universe abhors a vacuum. The most effective way to stop ourselves from absorbing and taking on more negativity is actually by replacing it with positivity, by replacing it with something greater than ourselves. And so for me, connect is about connecting to divine source, connecting to our spiritual gifts, connecting to awareness of the fact that, like, we are part of something substantially greater than ourselves. And that when we feel that interconnection, life is easier, life is better. And then the fifth step is act, which has to do with, now that we've figured out these things, how do we live in a different way? How do we act in a different way? How do we live as responsible empaths, as opposed to world class awfulizers who are rushing into rescue and taking on all of the stuff and feeling the sense of urgency that it's our job to fix everything? And so, a very big part of act has to do with really recognizing not just what's ours and what's not ours, but what's our job and what is not our job, and not feeling the burden of responsibility for things that is really not our job to do. Because one of the things I've seen, I know from my own personal experience, and I've seen with many other highly sensitive empathic people, is that we volunteer support before we're ever asked for it.
Mhm.
And a lot of times we don't just volunteer it, we meddle.
Mhm.
We go in there, we get our hands into things. We think we know better. We think we know what somebody needs more than they do, and we kind of will rush into rescue with no consent, with
Mhm.
no permission. And we might even bully our way into being like, I know better, I know what you need more than you do.
Mhm.
And the problem with this is that, I mean, there's so many problems to this, but the problem with this is that if we do not have permission and we do not have consent, it's, number one, it's not going to land. It's a
Mhm.
waste of our energy and a waste of our resources. But it also has a tendency to, really back, kind of like boomerang on us. Because if somebody's not really receptive to receiving that support and help, we're the ones who are going to end up basically like doing all that emotional processing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh my
So
gosh, I love it.
so there
I
you are. Yeah.
yes, and again, oh my gosh, because and you just said it so you must have written it. I'm just kidding. It was so you expressed it so well. And again, I think so many people need this because you do get into I can't say no. I want to be a people pleaser.
Yes.
I want to say yes, because that's a part of us. And so again, I wish I had this book when I was a lot younger. So everybody that's out there that's an empath and you're struggling, even if you're not struggling, it's a great resource to have so that you can help other empaths. It's almost like you're planting a seed. You're starting that brick to help people along the way. So,
Mhm.
empathic mastery, because we need to master that because we need to make our world a better place.
Yeah.
And Jennifer, thank you so much for going into the detail that you did. Again, I think it's going to help a lot of people, and a lot of people are going to go, I need to go get that book. So, thank you for sharing that with us.
Oh, you are so welcome. Michelle, do we have a second for me to make an observation?
Absolutely.
Okay. I wanted to say that, the word empath is one that some people identify with, some people don't. And a
Oh,
lot of
right.
times I've had the experience of people, as I've been working with them, realizing that they're empaths after we've been working together. And so, a lot of times, if you're a person who has been told you are too sensitive, you're overreacting, if you have a hard time saying no, especially if you find yourself feeling emotionally, like, there's a lot of times where you feel sort of weird, wonky, and emotional, but you cannot put your finger on why you feel this way. Like, it does not make any sense. It doesn't correlate with your life. Even if you don't necessarily think of yourself as an empath, it's very likely that you are an empath. Because the thing is, as a culture, we've been so gaslit to about these feelings. And I personally believe that part of what happens is the empath acts as the designated feeler in a family system. And when you have people who don't want to acknowledge what they're feeling, or are just trying to, like, move along, nothing to see here, people, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, that what often happens is that the empath is told that, like, they are told from a very early age, this is not real, this is not happening, you are just being too sensitive. And so I've noticed that there are a lot of people who come in, and when I first start to work with them, their perception of themselves is that there's something wrong with them, that they're too sensitive, and that they're even broken. And as we work together, it's like, oh, I'm just picking up on all of the stuff that other people are not acknowledging and are not dealing with and are not, taking
Mhm.
responsibility for. And I'll say
Right.
one other thing that I think is really important about sort of that urgency or that desire to rescue, which is that as empaths, when we have not dealt with our own feelings of despair, um, anger, grief, worry, all the things, we get triggered when other people feel that. It activates the stuff inside of us. And so we want to rescue because we feel better
Mhm.
when other people feel better. And so
Absolutely.
that's something that I think is really important to know, is that when that urgency comes up, it's usually because it's too uncomfortable for us to sit
Mhm.
with that discomfort.
I love it. I'm so glad that you tagged that in there because that is so true for so many people. I mean, I have a daughter that has a difficult time going to the mall because of
Mhm.
all the people that are surrounding her, and she can feel everybody's emotions, and she goes, I can't handle that. So she can
Mm-mm.
only go to the mall when she's strong emotionally,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
so yeah.
Yeah, and finding, and this is something where there's, in terms of protect, where there's the energetic boundaries and the barrier, and the energetic protection of, am I strong enough? Are my filters and shields up? Are my
Right.
loins girded? But then there's also the strategic side of it, like, don't go to the mall on Saturday at noon.
Mhm.
Don't go to the mall on a Friday evening.
Right.
Go to the mall on, like, maybe a Tuesday or Wednesday morning. Like, find a time, or like late afternoon or something, like, find a time where you're going to be less likely to get bombarded. Find a
Mhm.
time, like, and plan your strategy. Like, I'm very sensitive to fragrance. And so I'm very mindful of not walking past Abercrombie and Fitch, because God bless that store, they pump the perfume out into the hallway. I'm very mindful of, like, not walking past Abercrombie and Fitch. I'm very mindful of not walking, going into some place like Bed Bath and Beyond. And so even, like,
Mhm.
planning my strategy of, if I have to go to the mall, I actually think about, what exactly am I going in there for? What am I going to purchase? Where do I need, and how do I get to that store in the most efficient way? And how do I get the hell out of Dodge as fast as possible? And so I do not go to malls for entertainment anymore,
Mhm.
because it is too stimulating, and also just, it's too toxic, because
Yeah.
not only are we dealing with the energy of the mall and all kinds of, like, people often, I think, go to the mall for emotional reasons. They don't go necessarily for practical reasons. And so we're picking up all of those people, but then on top of it, we're picking up the EMFs, the
Mhm.
Wi-Fi signals, the weird, wonky, like, lighting. Like, I used to react to fluorescent lights very badly when I was younger, because of the vibration of the fluorescence. I would get headaches going into malls. And then, as I mentioned, the fragrances, which
Mhm.
are, can just really knock you on your butt.
Yeah.
So, in my personal experience, malls are not something I spend as I've gotten older, I've given myself permission to really not go to malls. I try to shop much more in the smaller stores, of and like, shop as locally as possible. But when I do go to the mall, I'm very deliberate about that process. So I totally identify with everything your daughter goes through,
Oh,
because that was
absolutely.
definitely my experience.
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
we've had to and that's exactly right. I couldn't take her to the mall when she was younger unless it wasn't that busy. So, Totally. I
Right,
love the strategic plan that people need to really think about. Okay, are
right.
you ready for the last question of
I am.
Okay. All right, let me pop it on. Here is the wheel. So let's see what question. Let me go ahead and spin it and see what you're going. Let's see. Anticipation. Oh
It's
my
making me
gosh.
wait.
Okay.
Favorite book? Oh,
All right. So, besides your own
okay.
book, what is your favorite book of all time?
Oh my god, that is such a hard question. I love books. I love books. I love books so much, and it really depends on the day. Can I have
Yeah.
2? Okay.
Absolutely. You
Um,
can answer
yeah,
as much as
so
you want to.
okay. So, for some reason, there are 2 books that are coming to my mind. One book is Illusions by Richard Bach. It was one of the very first books that absolutely opened my mind and really shifted my way of thinking about pretty much everything. It is such a magical book, and it's a really short, fast, sweet book. And then, the second book that I wanna hold up is this book called The Fifth Sacred Thing that was written by a woman named Starhawk that is a fictional
Hmm.
story about an apocalyptic future where San Francisco and California and Los Angeles are kind of like the earth-loving, crunchy, hippie, alternative spiritual people are in San Francisco, and, like, the GOP, like plastic people are who are just consuming resources are in Los Angeles, and it's this tension between these two worlds when resources are scarce and when things have happened. And it's very much a story about how do we reconcile power over without becoming violent and becoming like getting into power over ourselves. And it's such a spectacular book. I really love it. And then I'm going to give an honorable mention of one more book because, like I said, I just love books too much, and that is
Yeah.
my friend Chris Ferraro's book Energy Healing, because it is just a really good, very solid resource for how to get started on the path of energy healing. And I just it was I it's just an absolutely wonderful book, and I love it. So, Illusions by Richard Bach, Fifth Sacred Thing by Starhawk, and then Energy Healing by Chris Ferraro. And thank you for letting me have 3 books.
Oh, absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
you know what they say, that is actually a characteristic of a true author, one that
Mhm.
loves to read books. Because a lot of people
Yeah.
think I'm going to write a book, but they don't read that much. So that means that
Mm.
you are a professional author.
Well, and at this
So,
point in time, I since the setting up of my bio, I actually at this point in time have created I have a companion
oh,
diary that goes with Empathic Mastery that is the tagline is a guided journal to live as the intuitive badass you're meant to be. And it's basically all kinds of
oh, love
material
it.
that you can work through for 13 moons. So it's a year of work, which allows us
Oh,
to like celebrate our week. It allows us to calibrate. It allows us to understand where are we coming from, what is going on. And then I've also created 2 additional kind of handy dandy pretty journals for additional writing and tracking. And I've got another book. I've got actually wow, yeah, I've got 2 there are already 2 um multi-author books that I've been part of, and 2 that are coming out in the spring. One of them is
right.
both of them I'm really excited about. And then I've got another book that is in the works right now that is in the hands of my content editor, and it's going to get thrown back to me to go back in and massage it and turn it into the
Oh
amazing
my
book that it is.
gosh.
And this one is channeled, and this one is
Oh, wow.
basically all about the evolution that's going on our planet right now, as and why things are the way they are, why it's as hard as it is, and what do we do
Mhm.
about it. So, yeah, I think
Oh
at
my
this point in
gosh.
time, I've gone from wannabe author to I really am an author.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely, and you found your
yeah,
passion, and
I
you
have.
found
Yeah.
yeah, and, that's how to me, that's how you show us your passion, what you have learned in your life, and what you wanna share with the world. So that is definitely your story, and Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing today, because like you said, we
Ah,
could talk for hours.
we could talk for hours, Michelle. It has
Because
been such a delight to be here. Thank you so much for
Well, thank
having me.
you. Oh, well, first of all, where can they find you? Where can people find Jennifer Moore?
So I've got a really simple system. Basically, go over to empathicmastery.com for all the things. And if you want the book, empathicmasterybook.com. If you want the podcast, empathicmasteryshow.com. And if you want to learn more about studying with me and being part of my annual program, the Empathic Mastery Academy, then
Oh.
it's guess it, empathicmasteryacademy.com. So all of these things are like everything is basically empathic mastery with the thing at the end of
Right.
it. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, Jennifer, thank you. Keep spreading your wings and helping others in your life, because you shine so bright. I love
Oh,
that.
thank you, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for seeing me.
Oh, absolutely. And I want to thank everybody for listening. This is one that you probably have to listen more than once to get all of the information. So rewind that button and rewatch it.